So we'll jump right in. So last part one of our series here, we left off with Skip kind of walking through this template CSS file that he created, which was very useful in being able to repurpose a style sheet, quickly adapt it to new customers that have similar layouts, or if you're wanting to create some sort of a standard for your typical spaces where you're creating UIs. Skip walked through that with us, kind of showed us how to use that, how and why he decided to do the things he decided to do. It's scary getting inside his head a little bit. I have to live with it, unfortunately. But what we'd like to do is go a step further with implementing this template as an imported file and showing what that looks like to import a file that you may have created and repurposing the classes and the properties that you've put in, reusing certain things, creating new things, how that works, overriding things from the imported template, how all of that works. And so Skip's going to kick us off. He's sharing his screen here, and we're just going to dive right in and start talking about, maybe do a quick overview of this file here, and then dive into redeploying it in an imported fashion.
Cool.
What that looks like.
All right. Well, if you, for those that were here last time, this will be a review. If not, I'm just going to briefly talk about, this was the file that we left off with, and quote, a template. And a template being, it's just from an organization standpoint and a capability to repeat this, I think, in a faster deployment was really what the strategy was when I created it. You can see here that I'm importing some custom fonts. This is an icon font. I will make mention of this, and I'll talk about this when we get to the importing part. And you can see, I don't know if everybody can see it, right? There's single quotes versus double quotes, right, around the font. There is a particular, if you're less than version 10, this can cause some anomalies where sometimes those imports don't always happen consistently in different places. So you'll see when we move to them getting separated and things like that, that I've gone to all double quotes for all importing. So I just wanted to make mention of that real quick. But so I'm doing all my imports. Again, this is where we left off. I'm doing all my imports in my root directory, and I did say that correctly this time as opposed to what I usually call it. I make reference, this is in the root directory is where you put all your variables. And I think that's really the key to creating a template, is having sets of variables that you can recall down below. And I'll kind of go over that here in just a second. So you've got your pixel sizes, colors, any images that I want to reference, like a logo, background colors, other things. I'm totally enamored with linear gradients. That's one of the things you can't do, and just general properties in Designer. So I leverage that often. And then I come down here, and this is where I start to create what is the mechanism to repeat this, right? So these are global, these are variables calling variables, right? And this is still inside the root directory. And I'll do this in more detail when I split them apart, but each part of this, I have buttons that I call that are for navigations. I have buttons that are for source, right? They're just types of buttons in particular parts on a UCI that I have the capability to style them different, right? And I have 3 different kinds, right? Nav, source, and transport. Flexbox was an interesting one. So I created some global properties. There are a lot of moving parts on Flexboxes, mainly creating one set in rows, set in columns, meters, faders, and then any images or background colors. And then you've got your global properties, where these are set at runtime. Basically, when the file starts, they get applied, but they're also the lowest priority. So you've got that. And then we start down here into the actual class for the button navigation. And you can see that I'm just calling these global properties, these things from the root directory. The idea here is we're going to split this. So what I had found was there was a couple of things. I am forever a tweak. I tweak files a lot, and I'm always doing things. And what I kept finding myself is I kept touching the things down below here. What we're trying to achieve is that from here down, you don't touch the file anymore, right? Because all it is just calling variables that you're setting up here. So that was the general idea, so that I didn't have 72 different versions of my starting file, which I did. And also,
doesn't sound very helpful.
It was not, and it was, and then I have, as a part of this file, we have an imported set of custom icons. Well, that means that if I'm doing each one of these files individually, I had to go to and remember where all of those files were that I needed to update that custom icon font. And that just was not manageable. So I discovered it on our own deep dives, right? I watched one of our deep dives with Kevin, and he talked about imports. I know Coy had mentioned imports, and I didn't, for whatever reason, pay attention to what that actually meant. And so I went down that road. So what I've done is basically start to split this file in half. And I'm going to split it in half basically right here, right after my global properties. Everything down below is going to be part of my base template file, right? My base template file looks similar. Now I have done some weeding out of some things where I took some of the colors out. This was originally branded to the Q-SYS branding guidelines, which we have 25 of each one, 25 different colors, which I thought was a little over the top as far as that. But I did keep some key colors that I use on a global level. But you can also see here that I start using double quotes everywhere. I did actually have a serious anomaly where it was not in every time, where sometimes my custom font would show up and sometimes it wouldn't. And then sometimes it would be an older version and weird things started to happen. But now,
but that has been resolved.
That has been resolved as of 10.0.1. It did get resolved, although I think best practices, depending on what file you're looking at, go with double quotes on anything that gets imported, just as a habit from that standpoint. So anyway, I break this file apart, and this is, because I broke it apart, the template folder, right, that holds this. I now, because I am storing my fonts here, I only have to have this Oscar Origins font in one folder in one place, which means that every time I want to update to it or add to it or do what, I only have to go to one place and change that. And then because I'm using it this way, I'm using this base template, it then updates everything and will import to any new files, right? And this is all right, so we go through here. I have some colors. I am referencing, now I'm probably referencing more than anybody wants to use it. I'm referencing some other things, some images for different classes that we teach here and things like that. But I'm referencing all of my standard images that are in the folder. And I'll show you the folders in both in the base template and in the like my starter files, which I'll show you here in a minute. And then I've got my linear gradients that I use, and it looks very similar to here. And then this is all my navigation, right? So that's my base template file.
As we kind of dive into this, let's talk about the importing process and what that looks like. What does it do with that initial template file you're using versus what you're importing it into?
And that is a great segue into this next tab that I'm about to click on, because that is perfect. So again, you saw the base template didn't look a whole lot different from what I had before, right? This is my starter file, right, that I use in association with the template file. And you can see the first thing is I'm doing an import, and I'm importing that base template file, which means I'm importing everything that's in that base template file into this file. Now, technically speaking, I don't have to put this part right here because it's in the template file. What I have found is I have to do less saves and less things if I just repeat it here, which is more or less doing a general overwrite.
So you mean saves like close the file, reopen the file
Correct.
type thing? Okay.
And before everything shows
apply.
to get it to connect the dots all the time. This, I found that if I just repeat this part at the top, then I have to do less of that for it to all show up. Now, the template file, remember, it brings in everything that I had in the other file. I did, just as a fun one, I didn't have a pixel size of 4, so I put that in there.
So what happens if, say, you had a bunch of pixel sizes in your base, those get imported, I create a new size 3, let's say you had a size 3 in there. What does that do? Does it override?
It would actually override it.
Okay.
So, and that's the method for what I would tell you that you should do and I'll show you some examples when we get down here as far as when you should overwrite or / make something completely new and what that all looks like.
Sure.
I do repeat those base colors again, which again is not necessary. But one of the reasons that I did it, particularly in the opaque or the O version, I start to manage a light and a dark version. So the light version, I have an opacity set at 60, which is, I forget what percentage that is. It is a little more transparent. Whereas a dark version, I do it less transparent, just so that's a stylistic thing. So when I start to divide here, that's why I'm importing these colors again.
And that way, if you want to modify those for this particular file that you're using to actually deploy, you do it right here. You're not going back to your template.
I'm overriding what's in that template file with these colors.
Which these just happen to be the same colors, but
correct.
Yeah, I got you. They could be whatever.
And we'll get to when I show you branding, you'll see how I would add additional colors.
Gotcha.
Where I even protect this. Now, in this template file, in the images folder, really the only thing I have in the images folder is this logo. Right. So if you're adding for a customer or something like that, and you can just import their logo into the folder, and that's the only new reference to an image. I'm actually referencing the image from the other template right here for the background.
Yeah.
Again, I'm just making a reference to that I have available for me to do. I have these. This is another one specifically to the dimmer. The dimmer is weird, the way that we have to do it, because you have to use the same color twice and then make it actually transparent using the same exact color. But again, I just put those in here. But again, I'm overriding what's in that template file.
So looking at this, you've got the linear gradient shown here. A question that we've already had come up was asking about the linear gradients, how those work. Do they show up and reflect? Which obviously, if you're using any style, you want it to show up and reflect just like we want it to show up on the touch panel, right?
And they do.
And they do, yeah.
And they do.
Yeah.
There are, I haven't had any issues with the linear gradient showing up. There are some rendering engines that do some things where they push things around or things might look a little bit different, but linear gradients, I have had no problems them showing up anywhere.
In a place we've seen that actually is Firefox, right?
Firefox is,
we opened,
if you make it look good in Firefox, it'll look good.
Yeah. Somewhere we found, we were pulling up Reflect in Firefox and thinking there was a problem, and Skip chased his tail on this. He's like, what am I doing wrong? It looks good everywhere else. And then, you know, happenstance just opened Chrome that day and it looked fine. And we realized all these hoops you were trying to jump through to fix a problem that didn't exist was Firefox actually creating the problem. So something to consider knowing. It may look wrong in some browsers and right in others. And obviously we have no control of that. You could play with it, I suppose, and try and fix it in one, but there was no fixing that. The shifting, it was the shifting of the images and the text on the buttons looked off in Firefox. And I don't know if they've made updates since, because we have opened Firefox since with files.
It has been better.
Yeah, where it looks right with files that we never changed, but Firefox maybe updated something and it corrected those HTML issues.
Go figure.
Go figure.
So yes, I haven't had any issues with linear gradients, but I'm just putting a few in here. Now, remember that I also still have all available. I have those other gradients that I have here. Now, one thing that I'm not going to call it a con, but it's an understanding of if I'm calling on something. All right, I'm going to open up the file real quick. All right, so this is the original file where we left off.
Okay.
Right. I do have, and that's one, if you download in the part 2 of this, download the file. This is the file that you'll open. I have that base template that we're looking at, right? And here is the light version of that. Now I can just go straight to the, I have to actually click on it. I have to go straight here to the light, and you can see that I have a gray gradient, right? Which is what is representative of what's happening here, right? This is what I'm calling those gray in my global gradient properties here. Now I can change this, but you'll notice that the only gradient that I have a choice of as far as that pops up in VS Code are the 2 grays. I actually have more options because I still have all the other ones that are available through the imported. They just don't show up in this list. So this is where I'm not going to call it a real con, but it's an understanding that they won't automatically show up, but you do have them available. So I can change them. Whoops, not to that. I don't know what that is.
Buy one.
Yes. Right. I can change these because I know that I have a blue and a blue opaque. Right.
In your imported.
In my imported.
Okay.
Which I can show you that. So if I hit save and I say yes, right, it saves and I now have the blue.
Using the blue. Look at that.
Right. And that's coming through the imported. So just be aware that when you're right, and you can confirm that you have that blue, right? I have those blue and blue, and I have the red and the green. This also comes in really handy. Again, it's just something I wanted you to understand that in VS Code, you don't see those. And that was really a nice prompt. And I actually hesitated here to actually continue, but I really like protecting the template. If I can impart that to you, is that having that base and not touching it is going to serve you well. It does take a little bit of maintenance and care, right? That you don't do those things, but having that will serve you better in the long end. But I'm just going to continue down, and this looks very similar. This is where I would set any of these global radiuses, things like that. And then I can do individual things that I want to each one of those navs. You've seen this, my transport, my flex boxes, all of those things, right? And I go down to my, my global properties. This is something that's not in my template file. This is something that I created specifically for one of the UC platforms, like your Team or Zooms, where I needed a transparent background, right? And if you look, normally, like, so if I click on something, right, normally these show up alphanumeric, right? But because I've created this new, something completely new in the current style that I'm using, it shows up at the very bottom. It will then be alphanumeric at the very
from that point.
From that point.
Gotcha.
Right. So if I had multiple things, so it's just something that I wanted you to see. right? So this, if you create something new in the, what I call my base.
So all the things above UCI second overlay are from the imported style
Correct.
sheet.
Or an overwritten of the same name.
Same name, got it.
Right. So it will show up if you overwrite something, right? Like all of these variables. But if I took something, let's do that. All right, let's do, whoops, can't see. Let's go down and I'm going to do something with the colors. Let's see. My mute buttons.
Everybody's got a mute button.
Everybody's got a mute
That's
button.
a good one, right?
Right. So I'm going to take this. This is in my template. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to paste it down here. And we're going to change it. All right. Let's say I want this to be blue. And I want this to be green.
I like it green when muted.
Yeah, totally.
We're appealing to the non-Americans on the call.
Let's see. Oh, I want to make this one blue.
A little transparency in there. I like
There
it.
you go. All right. So now I save that. And we'll go to the file and we'll put it on one. All right. So this is what that looks like now. Oh, hold on. Gotta save this. All right. So there it looks now. But when you look at it on the list, it's not at the bottom. It's where it normally is, where it was before.
Because
right?
it already existed.
Because it already existed, and I just overwrote it and changed it.
Gotcha.
So that's your, I guess, order of operations. Again, I have not changed my template. My template is the same. So the next time I import it, they're going to be, in this case, they'll be green when they're off or when they're on, and then red when they're off. But if I wanted to change that, or I had, say,
specifically
customer
for
colors,
customer,
whatever you wanted to do, I am overriding it. And that's what your procedure would be. Sometimes you need to create something new, right? Again, it's where it's going to show up, but I can just tell you, after having, and I'm not kidding you, probably 72 versions of the same template, that I kept overriding was just the frustration from that standpoint. The other part that is, if you're managing anything like a custom font where you're changing it all the time, having to do it, or you're adding to something, having to only do it in one place is a freeing experience.
Well, and think about all our dealers who are working with different customers. They've got a different look and feel they've got to mess with. They don't want to start from scratch. The copying and pasting. Oh, does this one I copied and pasted have the new thing in it? What do you have? Because we all like lists. Maybe, I guess that you're already kind of doing this without explicitly saying it, pros and cons to those things. The benefits of importing versus just copying and pasting and editing.
So the pro is the management side. Although ironically, on the same part there, it does take some care and a little bit of management, but I would say far less management to maintain the template by not touching it. What you have to do to manage that is far less than versioning, right?
Well, I think about, I'm working for customer X and then I go to customer Y, and customer Y, I add that new icon, let's say, that I needed for their project, and I want to use it again. I got to remember which job was that on. Correct. And as much as we like to believe we're going to remember that, we can probably all attest to not saving things in a better way. I think of the user component. We tout it in class. Save your user components whenever you make something or do something that you're going to reuse. Don't try to pretend like you're going to remember which job that was used in, and you're going to go dig it out of that file or dig it out of the style sheet in this case.
Yes.
Just keeping it in that base template that you're using on every job means when I update something, it's there. That means if I go back to customer X, I just have my template imported back into that style sheet with the new thing I added for customer Y, because I put it in the base template, not the customer one for that specific job.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you look at, like, so here's your base template folder, right? Then there's the start light that we were looking at, and I have a start dark, right? So if you look down below, there's ones for Slack and Spotify, which I'll get to here in a minute, but
all of these are on that GitHub, by the way, for those of y'all listening in. If you want to look at these, I uploaded the Slack and Spotify.
The start and the light and the dark are actually in the designer file already, so that you can export them out of there. But this is so if I had, this is customer X, right? This is the name, and then I went to customer Y. I literally would copy and paste this and put customer Y.
Right.
I would not. I use the template, right? Now, so that you know, under these resources, this is how it works. All the base template has to be loaded. You don't really, and as a procedure, it's weird. Again, this is not less saving, closing, and then reopening again. I go through and I don't have to technically, but I apply this first. And then I apply this. That just links the icons and links all the things. I've found it just better.
Less hiccups along the way.
Less hiccups along the way.
Gotcha.
Again, it's all happening in the next, but if you save and reopen again, it will work.
And I think where we saw that was maybe when we were doing some light and dark stuff, where not having just clicked it before you loaded, basically it wouldn't translate to all the controls in the file, right?
Yeah. Also, too, if you have any another anomaly, this has nothing to do with just a CSS in general. If you apply a style and you have controls or things that happen to be invisible,
okay,
when you apply them, the dots don't always connect.
Gotcha.
When you save and reopen, they will be there and it will all work. It just may look wrong initially when
Gotcha.
you make them visible. They might not have the style. That's just a thing. So again, there's your order of operations when you're talking about creating something for different customers. I have a light dark mode, right? And I have those starting just because I have some few subtle tweaks to how I start from a color standpoint. And these for me are guidelines, right? These guidelines, when I am importing colors for a customer, right? And I do decide to use a transparent version of their color. If you wanted to do that, I have the guidelines that light version, I use 60. Now you may have a different preference.
Could depend on your background, right? The customer colors and things like that. Yeah.
But I know what it is. And so I'm going to import and I'll open up those branded ones here in just a second, but and we can talk about that and branding. But then I wanted to finish. I didn't get quite to the bottom. This is something that you've seen, right? This is where you're going to style like you normally would, right? Sometimes I need to customize this. Sometimes I can just leave it the way that it is, right? And you're just changing the stuff up top in order to feed into this, right? And I get down to the bottom, and this is the end. This is it, right? I've set my globals, right? This is where I'm importing if there are any customer fonts. So up here, if there are any custom fonts that a customer has, I'm importing those. Again, I'm just repeating them because that's the only custom font we have. But I'll show you some other, when we get to the other different customers, they'll have custom fonts and they just import them here. And that would exist in the file folder in the newly copied, like my base start, like for Slack Lite, they have a custom font. It lives in their font folder, right? I don't have to re-import Oscar because that came from the template. I don't have to re-import all the things I already have. So all you really have inside here is their logos, right? I have some other things, but I have their logos. I actually haven't cleaned out this folder. I technically don't need all of these because I'm getting them from the template,
right?
You can make your file size. It actually, So Koi has experienced this, right? I am now I'm trying to think of what the phrase is. I'm adverse to using images because of file bloat it can really, really, bloat your file. So that's why I went to, for those that were here the last time in the rabbit hole, that's why I went to making an icon font.
Yeah, something I saw recently was even with images that I wasn't using in the style sheet, they're still part of the import process. So even if you're not using them, at first I commented them out and was like, "Ah, good enough, no problem." And then and then I actually looked at the file size, and I had all these images that I was just kind of playing with in the file, but I wasn't actually using. And my file went from 30 meg to 150 with all these images that I wasn't even using.
Yeah.
And I quickly realized, don't leave those in there. You're gonna have a large file for something you don't even need, and strip those extras out. No problem. I went back down to 30-ish.
And then as well as managing those file sizes. I mean, I don't expect everybody to be a graphics expert, but just minimizing the file just size itself, any way that you can do it as well, to make sure that you're being judicious about what your images that you're using, which is why I've gone down to, I have a few background images which I've shrunk the size of those to where they're big enough and they have enough resolution that they look good on the interface. But not more.
Yeah.
Right. I don't put any extra data into those that I don't need, just to be, again, cautious of that. I'm not telling everybody not to use images. I'm just telling you that when you use images, that you are using those, and not anymore. I'm not just throwing things. And you see a lot of these images that I have in there, and they're like teeny, right? They are as
100
big,
kilobytes or something. Yeah.
I mean, I have files that, they're as small as I can possibly make them.
Yeah. So using icons or images as your icons adds up quickly. You may think it won't because they're small, but the way that they're brought into the design file, they grow, they get larger.
Well, that was the first rabbit hole I went down. Is I had there was 100, we'll call it 150 icons, but I had 5 colors of them.
Yeah.
So that's 5 times 150. Now they were anywhere from literally 3K.
Yeah.
But having to render all of those and having to import all those, my file size on this particular file was 250 megs by the time the designer file came together. So it's just something to be cautious of. I don't want to freak everybody out about using images, but just be conscious of what you're doing. And again, this is, I'm setting my root directory, and that's kind of the whole concept and the idea about this, is that all you really need to do is set your root directory, and then you're done. Now, every file on some level will require something a little bit different, right? You're trying to accomplish a look on the UI, or you're trying to communicate something on the UI that isn't addressed here, right? Again, that is, you build it here new. Now, here's where if you like something, and here's where I go with it. If you like something that you've created custom in this particular one, and you think it's something that you're going to repeat, you then add it to the template. And then, by the way, every time you open up any of those old files, it updates the template.
Right. Yeah.
And you have it available in the template in one place. Again, protecting that template is the idea behind this. Any questions from the group?
We did have a comment that maybe we can just reiterate to everyone. Jordan said, so when we're installing, we install the base template in your design resources, in addition to the one that you're making for that customer.
Correct.
Gotcha.
So in here, so if you look at your design resources, The template has to be as far as what's installed. You don't load it over here, right? You're still just loading your, whatever the customer name is, what have you, right? I have a light and a dark mode that I have loaded, right? And so I can switch back and forth. And if you're switching back and forth, say your file is going back and forth between light, dark mode, that's what you're switching between.
Right.
You're not, each one of these is looking at this
Right.
and has all that available.
Right.
But it has to be loaded for you to see it.
To see it. Yeah.
Right? That's so you have to bring it into your file in order for those other ones to see the import. But yes, that is how you would do that.
Gotcha. Perfect. Another comment we had, Millie said, I used to experience issues with some fonts, for instance, Open Sans Bold, being pulled in from CSS that just didn't work. It would show in UCI viewer, but not necessarily on the panel, and vice versa, to the point where I've just stopped using font styles from CSS. I know this was due to be fixed in the latest versions. Do you know if this has happened yet? I've definitely, and I'll let you jump in here. Something that I've used before was that's a font that exists in the properties natively. I don't know that you necessarily need to import that, right? You could just set it to that be your font that you want to use and then call bold.
You don't have to import it, but you set it as a font family because I believe it's still referenceable as a font family where you, and look at that. So in my global properties, I'm setting my font family here. And that's something I would try. I don't know specifically about the particular font that you're talking about or the fix necessarily. I know that where I talked about in the imports, depending on what version of Designer you're using, single quote versus double quote, as weird as that sound. I mean, I literally had to go to like level 3 tech support. And I sat with somebody and we loaded this file over and over again, and we're trying different things. And he eventually tracked it down. And it has since, like I said, as a 10.0.1, I believe it's all fixed as far as the single, at least in reference to the importing here from a CSS. It literally would skip over it. Like you would see it and it would say, I don't see it.
Yeah.
And it would just skip over it.
It would see it, then say it doesn't see it.
Don't see it. Yeah, just I'm only kidding.
It sees it, says, I don't know what you are, and keeps moving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe that's some of it, then you might take a look at that.
Yeah.
It is something that we'll take a note on, and I will talk about something that's like Coy said, about if it's a native font that's in Designer and then the referencing point. But I think that you would just do it from a setting of a font family as opposed to having to actually do the import up here part.
Another question we had here, what is the benefit of the pixel size variable, which I'll let you answer. I mean, I know what you're using that for, but I'll let you answer that.
It is
anything that you can apply a pixel change to, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And yes, I could type the pixels, right? I'm using these right here, mostly for like borders and radiuses and things like that. That's why I do it. And so I use variables. And if you see down, well, none in this one. If you see down here, like I'll refer to a size, right? And its size. And I do it the same thing when I'm picking a font size too. Now I do write those in. Let me go down here. I do write those in because everywhere that in every software, I have picked a font size by a number. And it frustrates me when I see what's an extra large, because what is an extra large font? Can we take a survey, Coy, on what the heck is an extra large font? And how big is that?
Yeah.
And how many pixels are those?
Yeah, what's extra large to y'all?
Yeah.
And what's large and what's medium and what's medium.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so in every software, I have picked a font size. And so I have a font size list. Now I can make those and I could have these referred to variables, but those ones up top, I use mainly for, like I said, border radiuses, widths, things like that. So that's why those are a limited set. And they're my versions. It's what I like to set radiuses at. It's what I like to set border widths at. Now you could put those in there, so they're not every single size set as a variable, because that would be ridiculous, right? That's counterintuitive or counterproductive
At a certain point.
at a certain point. And for whatever reason, I don't know why I go by 6 when I pick font sizes. I have no idea where that came from. It is very OCD about it, but
I've definitely modified a version of this. I went by 3s.
okay.
The 6 is pretty good though. It's a good starting point.
It is what it is.
Where I started finding it helpful to have slightly different variations was text size in text displays and things like that. Where it was just, I was like, man, I think I can make it a little bit bigger, but I couldn't go 6 pixels, but I could do 3.
There you go.
Yeah. So you might
So
change it to your heart's content either way.
We'll talk about this one.
Yeah.
Now, if you have, this is the viewport min, and what this says is it sets a font size based on the minimum size of the object you're applying it to, right? So it's height, width, right? So if you're using a rectangle that is definitely a rectangle, not close to a square, but definitely a rectangle, I've had better experiences with this. And I'm going to show you what this looks like from an experience standpoint. So our button's here at the bottom. And I already have it set to that, right? So if I had a font, which this was normally like a 36, right? I'm going to take off and you can see the relationship. This is how I normally would have done it. I would have set the size, and then I would have gone to padding, and then I would have adjusted this. And it worked, and that's how I used to do it, right? And I've had varying success, but with the viewport min, right, it makes it bigger, so it still fits. Now you can explore with how tall, because you can actually come in a little bit. But now when I use padding, they both are relationally together, right? And I get a better relationship between the the font, and the icon font. They work together. And so I've been exploring a lot of that. And then now if you scale this,
Oh, baby,
they scale together.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Again, definitely a rectangle. Close to squares, it's all going to fall apart because it's going to not work. So definitely a rectangle. And that's been extremely beneficial, where I've started to use that, because then things can scale together. And I found less having to tweak font sizes from panel to panel, as long as I'm just recognizing, is it a rectangle, is it a square? If it gets closer to square shape, then I start doing it normal, like where I just choose the font and do it like I normally would. But
so we had a comment here from Aaron about viewport height. He said, for generic sizes, I've typically seen them defined in relation to viewport height. This provides a bit of flexibility when moving a CSS style of UIs of different resolutions.
Yeah.
Which makes total sense there. And it's definitely something to play with. Sometimes if you read the help file and it tells you this is the relation of this pixel based on viewport min, max, height, width. It's definitely something to play with to kind of see how it works and kind of figure out how it works for the file that you're working on in relation to the type of button that you have, if it's square, rectangular, or round. If people do round buttons still, I don't know. Maybe they do if they're trying to make it look like Google or something like that, or Zoom. I don't know what people use anymore. I stick to the more square things, but yeah.
Well, and then viewport min is basically it is picking which is saying which one is the minimum, which one is smaller.
Yeah, of the two. Yeah.
And I put this one in here, viewport width, right? You can tell it's going this whole size. But that is,
well, and look how that highlights your padding that you've added. Yep. Obviously, because that text is so large, you can see where that padding is coming into play for whatever content you've put on that button.
So again, that was just a little tidbit. That wasn't actually something I was going to talk about today, but it just came up.
Yeah, that's a good one. Another comment we had here, which I think is a more general conversation. For general user interface, are there standards where each element are to be located? For example, volume level, on the right, navigation on the bottom, stuff like that. That's a loaded question.
Man,
but
that could be an entire part 3 on this deal.
yeah.
As we teach it in class, and I'll talk about it a little bit as far as the way that we teach it in class. So I survey classes all the time as far as where do you put your navigation buttons. We're going to start there. And I get 2 answers. Most of them are at the bottom from an answer standpoint. I'm starting to get more answers on the left based in Zoom or Teams or something like that, where their interfaces have those navs on the side. Whatever it is, have your thought process out, think about it, and just be consistent with it. I tend to be bottom nav oriented because most of the time, most people are conditioned that when you're doing navigation, the things are at the bottom, and there's somebody making a comment on there. But
I drag my taskbar to the top of my screen.
You can do it.
But they all start there, right?
And they all start there as a generic. Now, why are these controls on here? Right? I have created I've created regions, right? My navigation bar at the bottom is also tied color-wise to my top bar, right? So color-wise, these will track together. In the middle, I have created this target where I am telling the user things are going to show up, and I'll emulate, things are going to show up here. As I say all the time, Coy, what is the best UCI? It's
boring.
It is boring.
But what does that mean, actually?
What does that mean? That means that the answer when a customer presses a button isn't, holy crap, how did I get here? Right? There should not, you should not
happen.
Yeah, you should not surprise your users in that way of when they press a button and I go to video routing, they should be doing something probably related to video routing when they get there. When they look at camera controls, you've created a target that says there's going to be camera controls when I show up there, right? So you're creating that expectation. So I've created this target in the middle. I tend to be side oriented, whether you're right or left.
Or both in this case.
Or both. And I actually did this so I didn't have to answer that question. But I don't care which side it is. If something is going to, these are personal opinions, not necessarily quote a standard. If something's going to be on the UI all the time and it's going to be outside my quote target, I would put it on the right because you're reading left to right, and I want what they're doing here to show up and be more important than what something that's already all the time there. It will have its own importance because it's always there. This is changing, and so I want it to be left to right first. That is the science of what my crazy logic happens in my brain. And that's how I arrived at whatever. Now, I also have versions of files where I've laid out to embrace the team in the Zoom. But again, I'm doing the same thing where I create a target, which, by the way, this target zone is where I put source, right? Because that's what I'm doing. I'm selecting a source when I'm in here, right? This is transport. These are transport controls, which has its own style. I'm calling emphasis on these controls by doing that. And it's just, I may or may not use them. I don't use them all the time because the other day I changed one of our UCIs and confused the hell out of Coy because I don't understand what these buttons are doing. And I was like, you're absolutely right, because they all look like they're on in this case. And it didn't work. So they may not always use, but in this case where I'm attaching them together, right? This is kind of like a little nav area where I have these little navigations where I'm just highlighting these controls and they work. You can play around with it, or I could just make them look like the source controls, and they normally would, and they would highlight when you press them and they would go blue, right? It's just ways that you have that you can stylistically keep things consistent. And that was, again, the whole point of this template, keep things consistent in a particular area. Everywhere in the middle of the screen, I'm waving my hand like you can see that part. Everywhere that you can, in the middle here between these are styled in a source, right? They all look the same. They're all consistent. Everything on the top and bottom are nav. And then if I want to highlight something in here, I use the transport. That is how I'm using those 3 different styles in that template. And once I set those templates, they're everywhere I call them. I just could call them.
Got another fun one for you.
Oh, fun one. Let's hit it.
Any way to use an icon font to get the icon to display centered above the text? I have not figured out a way to do this with QSC-icon. Yeah, that's a real thing. Who said that? Alex. That's a real thing.
No,
No.
no.
Yeah,
That was the
unfortunately not.
original. So just to go full circle on this, that was the original rabbit hole that I went down. Is I wanted to be able to put an icon at the top and words anywhere else. And
that's what made you fall in love with CSS, though, because you opened a can of worms you couldn't close again.
And I did accomplish that. The file size, which again ultimately led me to this template file. The file size was so big and so unmanageable, because every time you have an icon as an image and you want to change the color, you have to create a whole nother image. So file sizes just get exponentially too large. And if you want, I can send you the CSS to put an image anywhere on a button and put the text anywhere else on the button. And you will hate me if I send it to you, because it will be so unmanageable.
You'll bloat the file.
It will be huge. It will be huge.
Massive, yeah. Levels.
So I embrace the 2-button theory. I make
that most of us have come to realize.
I create 2 buttons, which is why I created this class. And I'll show you what the class is. So you can see that I have, whoops, up. These navigation buttons, right? Here's my nav button. And then down below, I have this icon font only, which in essence makes the button transparent, but it keeps the icon color. Anything, right? Yeah, it just makes it invisible, except for it tracks the same color for the font and the same color for the icon as the nav button. So I put one of those with a transparent icon where I want it over the top, and make it the same color. And when I press it, it does the same thing. It just is transparent both ways, but the icon changes colors with the state of the button. I embrace that. I don't like it, but it is what it is. What happens when you have an icon font? We don't support line break, which is the problem, right? CSS supports 2 different fonts on the same content. The best way I can explain it is that even though it's 2 different fonts, they get attached to each other, right? I can put the icon font and the font and it gets attached. I can put it at the beginning or I can put it at the end. So it's a line left or a line right. So I can put the words first and then the icon, or I can put the icon first and the words. You cannot line break it, and it doesn't do it. Will we ever? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But that is the harsh truth of it all. Maybe I can save you some pain.
I just cut into the chase.
Just cut into the chase.
That's what it is. Yeah.
Embrace rectangles.
Or have multiple controls for the same thing, right?
Yeah.
And one's got an icon, one has text.
Yeah, you just put the icon, put the font at the bottom, and then
he said 2 buttons is my solution, and that's kind of where we've all landed. It's funny because before I started using style sheets as in depth as I've come to use them, I found I made that distinction early on. I'm just going to make 2 controls, not realizing that was actually the solution to do it. Yeah. So we've got about 2 minutes or so left. I want you to share your find, and you may have said this in the part 1. If you go back to your UI here, talk to me about your rectangle around your target area there, and why that is not what it appears to be. Your rectangles around everything, I should say, around projector left, around projector right, around the center. Talk to me about what that is and why it is what it is.
Well, again, to go back to the regionalization part.
Well, I'm specifically saying it that one actually is a group box.
Oh, so I haven't added these to the files.
Okay,
So
okay, so
I don't like group boxes.
Talk about what you found out about group boxes and where
Versus
you found a flex box to be useful in a different way than they were intended to be used.
Correct. So, one, we started playing around with having a stroke or a line weight at only on sides, which you can do.
You actually see here on the transport buttons under Roku there. We created these.
There's no line, there's no border on this, right? But I have borders on these two sides. I have lines on these two sides. I can't do that to a group box because it technically doesn't have a middle. It has lines. You can put a color in there, but if you tell it to only have one side, it can't do that. And that's where I use a flex box. Plus, I also like a flex box, which
because the flex box allows you to
touch
do
it in the middle because I can grab it in the middle.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And I can't grab a group box in the middle. Yeah. So I use a flex box as a group box.
Yeah.
And I just make it, and I just apply the same style that I would normally.
Because you can apply to it like you can a button,
like
right?
you can a button, like you can a group box. It has properties. I can do one side. I can do anything that I can do to a button, which I can't do to a group box, I can do to a flex box. So I have, and then in the new files, the reason is that I did my due diligence or my lack of diligence and not touching this file. And I so badly I wanted to.
Yeah. Because you wanted to start with what
I wanted to start where we left off.
Yeah. Yeah.
The last thing, I just want to show an import of, in my design resources, I'm going to add two things. And you want to do, which one do you want to do?
Well, you liked did you do the Lenovo?
I did.
Okay, because I liked the Lenovo a lot.
Okay.
So what we did here while he's bringing this in, we went online and we just searched for branding guides for some big companies. We looked up, we found Slack, we found FedEx, Spotify, a few others. But Lenovo had some cool stuff in their branding documents. And we actually loaded this on that GitHub. So you can actually look at what a branding document might be. We kind of harped on this in part one about if you get no direction from your customer, find their branding guides to see how to implement something. But sorry, I'll let you continue here.
Well, I'm just going to add them. So I'm going to import them in.
Okay.
So here's my one where let's do the light version, the Lenovo Light. Oh, I did.
Did you select it?
Nope, I did not. I selected the other one, which I just applied.
You just applied to, that's all right. We'll make this one the
Lenovo
dark
Light. All right, and then this one is, whoops. And then we'll make this one, oops, click on it.
Now you gotta select that one.
Dang it. Lenovo Dark. Right?
Ooh,
What was cool about this whole background, this actually spells Lenovo back here. These little shapes are actually in their branding guidelines. Yeah. Right, to create these, and they'll give you shortcut. And so they gave you some pretty cool graphics as a part of this. And their logos and the different colors, you can actually colorize their logo, and they actually will allow you to put these, I think they call it aubergine.
Aubergine, yeah.
Right. Again, if you look, this is the same UI, and all I did was apply the new style. So once you,
with a few colors changed, right?
Yeah.
A few new logo. That
I'm going to open up one of them just real quick. I know we're at the end. Oh, that's not the one. I'm going to open up the Slack just to look at it.
Because it's in your other.
Because it's in the folder.
Yeah.
All right. So this is a Slack file, and I just wanted you to see that I still have all my original colors. Right. I left those in there, and then they have a lot of different colors. So Slack has a lot of different colors. Right. And then I use this is their core, this is their secondary, and then these are the transparent versions of them. Right. And all I did was add, and I have my shortcut names that I use. You can use them however you want. And then now I'm styling my gradients using their colors. That was it. And then this is where I'm importing their logo. So I'm dropping their logo in the folder, in the pics folder.
Yep.
Yep. And so I now have their logo. And they have a specific background, right? And I'm importing those just like the Lenovo had their specific background. And that's it. And then I'm calling them in the global here, and then I'm referencing, and I'm done. Right? This was about speed.
Yeah.
And I know that everybody's looking at this and going, I don't know how to do this, right? But follow each one, right? And you'll see, like if I click on it, it tells me everywhere that I'm applying it and then where it came from, right? Where it came from. You can see all of those, but it's just, again, this is, I go down to the bottom and then this is it. I have two special power, right? Remember those backgrounds for the power? I'm using their specific colors as
Sure.
opposed to the green and the red.
Yeah.
Right.
Makes sense.
I just did this stylistically. They had a specific green. They have a red.
Yeah.
I'm
So
using
use
their
those.
reds.
Yeah.
Their greens, that kind of thing.
And this file, the Slack and I think Spotify, we loaded into that folder as well on GitHub, so y'all can download that and take a look at it. Since we don't have any questions, we're gonna sign off here. Hopefully this was useful to you. We
I hope so.
had a number of people starting to drop off, so we'll pull the plug here. We went a little long, but please reach out to us if you have questions.
Anytime.
Coy.veith@qsc.com, skip.mussett@qsc.com. You'll probably get directed to Skip if you email me if it's a CSS related question, because he has gone to Wonderland and back in the world of Q-SYS.
So fun.
CSS.
We appreciate your time, and
thanks for joining us
here. See you on the next one.